Well, chaps, I don't quite know how this is going to play out. It's an idea I've had for a few days. I'm not sure how long a video is going to be, what I'm going to press on, because in my head I was going to do the entire route that the bus covers. I mean, the whole idea of this is mostly, I know it sounds rather selfish, mostly for my benefit to see if the old grey matter will be jiggled enough, because since it's been, as I say, it's been 2.5 months really, since a day in the office, and 2 and a bit months therefore since my last tour. And indeed, I took out the last tour quite literally on the Monday. I took out the last bus, I think it was at 5, maybe 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I was tired, and I had to be up early the next day, as it was, to go over to start at the Tower of London, and then got the messages on the way home to go to the office tomorrow, and the rumour mill went into overdrive, and then the rest is history. So I quite literally took out the last tour, maybe ever, with a guide. I don't think we're coming back. Well, I can't bear the idea of being unemployed again. When I was out of work from when I graduated uni, December 2008, technically that's when the graduation ceremony was, till July 2011, I was not in regular employment, aside from 2 weeks work at the 2010 Wimbledon Championships. And when I left M&S over a year ago, middle of March, I did not think a year on I would be talking to myself. Well, chaps, self-deprecating sense of humour, right? You're going to have to bear with me as I do it, because even though I've done the route many, probably thousands of times to be fair, since March 2019, I've got Google Maps open, and if you want to start that way, so that you might see my hand appear and all the rest of it, and got my internet, yeah. Bloody that was it. So we start. I've zoomed right out, honestly. Where are we? There we are. We start number 1 at Green Park Underground Station on Piccadilly. So in the interest of your own personal safety and all the rest of it, please, stay seated. Don't go up and down the stairs, or else I'll have a heart attack when the bus is moving, that is. And hopefully you've all got your headphones. So essentially, you start alongside Green Park, and Green Park's going to see you down the road here to our next stop. And Green Park is the smallest park in central London as far as public spaces go, at any rate. And it's always been a walled park really since the days when Charles II opened it up as his own backyard, or back garden even, at St James's Palace, which you can't see. But the wonderful beauty of it really is that it's also a way through, as you might be able to see depending on the day, to Buckingham Palace, which you're going to see through the blue gates on your left shortly. And Buckingham Palace is of course the Queen's residence in London anyway. As we get up towards the next stop at any rate, you're going to see coming into view the great white stone of the Royal Air Force's Bomber Command Memorial, dedicated chiefly to the 50,000 or so young men who flew with Bomber Command of all nationalities and never returned home. It's also dedicated to those who were made prisoner of war, of course, and those who did come home. Bomber Command's role in history remains awfully controversial, and it took until 2016 really for this to come along, and were it not for the likes of the late Sir Robin Gibb of the Bee Gees, it might never have happened really. It's a great effort. And as you see as we come away from the stop, there's a bronze relief of aircrew looking to a distant horizon. Or whatever we think nowadays of Bomber Command's role, those young men, and they were usually aged say 18 to 24 on average, had to do a job that they probably weren't entirely keen on themselves, and that a lot of people today would not want to do. So that takes you off, as you can see, onto Hyde Park Corner. Its official name is Duke of Wellington Place. And aside from Nelson, Duke of Wellington has the market on things named after him. Roads, pubs, the odd train station, I think, somewhere. Not in Britain, I don't think. and indeed many, 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 many things. Whereas Nelson, you'll see when we get to Trafalgar Square, probably that's the best piece of real estate. So you get in the middle of Duke of Wellington Place, the Wellington Arch as it's known. Otherwise officially it's Constitution Arch. It has a little museum inside, balcony levels front and rear. Where the museum is now used to be until the 50s the smallest police station, or the second smallest police station in London. No more than 3 bobbies and a cat, but the advent of the road around it, because they changed it a little in the 60s, meant that the police station had to close. It's officially known as Constitution Arch, and this bit brackets is because we're stuck in traffic, so massively stuck in traffic. Brackets, I remember once, one of the last tours in the last weeks, going out on a Sunday about 2 and thinking, well, bloody hell, I'm going to be doing one of the last tours, and the traffic was wrapped around because of they reduced it to 1 lane on the Sunday rather than 4, and I did a 3.5 hour tour, meaning that I had no 2.5 hour tour, which meant I only had 20 minutes before the last tour, and you're allowed a half-hour break. Constitution Hill runs on to the roundabout, parallel to us, still on your left. You can see the brick wall of Buckingham Palace, and that was named because that's where monarchs until Queen Victoria took their constitutions. And it's the road upon which that Queen Victoria survived 3 assassination attempts, and it was widened by her son, Edward VII. King Charles II used to come up and down it to and from St James's Palace, without any bodyguard really, and his brother James, Duke of York, always had a bodyguard, and once apparently asked Charles, "Why is it I have protection when you have none?" And Charles apparently said, in a 17th century equivalent of a burn, I suppose, "Who would kill me to have you as king?" Well, he knew what he was talking about, did old Charles, because the Duke did succeed him in 1685 and fled the country in 1688 during the so-called Glorious Revolution, and British history changed considerably from 1688 because we got William and Mary over from Holland, Mary being James's daughter. It's rather complicated sometimes with history. So as you see, you come around that up towards the Great White Edifice. That is of course the Lanesboro Hotel, which was St George's Hospital until 1980. The great and the good like to stay there, and if you are going down Knightsbridge, which is the road that runs down to your left there, it's usually a rather expensive sports car or 2 in front of the main entrance. And if you like that sort of thing, just keep your eyes peeled, because that's where most great hotels are. So before we join Park Lane, you come up past this nice house on your left next to Hyde Park Gate, and that's where the Duke of Wellington used to live. Apsley House, there you go. And he had iron bars over the windows when he lived there as Prime Minister. The only Prime Minister since the 18th century that didn't want to live at number 10. I suppose technically too, because Harold Wilson got paranoid, but that's a story later. So it's a museum now, jointly with Wellington Arch, devoted to Wellington, and the current Duke of Wellington, the 10th Duke of Wellington, who's also called Arthur Wellesley, lives in Hampshire at the ancestral seat with his wife, who is titled the Princess of Prussia, and effectively Prussia ceased to be back in 1945. So it takes you up onto Park Lane, our route up towards Marlborough Arch for those who are wanting the blue route. You know who you are. You get on your left, starting us off on our way up, because we're going to come back down. The Queen Mother Gates, a present from Her Majesty to her mother in 1992, 1990, I'm failed in 93. This is what I mean that I'm trying to work out in my head. And they only close them on the Sunday. And then the most brightly coloured gates in the whole Royal Park system. And indeed, that's your stop number 3. No, it's the next stop for the Blue Line. And there we go. As we work out to Marlborough Arch, that is Hyde Park on your left, the largest public space in London, or central London anyway. It's a royal park, and again has long connotations to the royal family, all the way back to Edward VIII, who took this manor ground really from the monks during the dissolution of the monasteries. Charles I started to open it up. It was used as an army ground for the Commonwealth Army, as it was known under Oliver Cromwell, from 1649 to 1659, and is much more than a park, really. It's one of the most beautiful spaces known in London, and Charles II effectively opened it up for the public, really. And you've got the Serpentine, you can go boating, and indeed you can go boating, cycling, right, horse riding, walking, and jogging, as you can see. Although the horse riding seems to be usually restricted to whoever's based at Knightsbridge Barracks on the south side of Hyde Park. If you carry on the Dew Line West, that is to say away to your left, you will reach Kensington Palace in about 10-15 minutes, depending on your pace. Probably longer than that for some people. I've done it in 10 minutes, weirdly enough. I don't know how. I have a rather quick walking pace. And throughout the course here, there's always something going on in Hyde Park. As I was saying until that last tour in March, it was still recovering from Winter Wonderland, which on average now in December sees something like 3 million people come through it. It starts sort of towards the end of November and usually is finished by January 5th, and incredible amount of it starts being put in, I think, in September, and next thing you know, you can't move for toffee when you finish your work for the day, and you can't get into Marlborough Tube Station. And if you go in there now, I guarantee it wouldn't be that busy, I'm sure. As you see, it's being taken care of now. All the what's-its are gone. It looks like First World War battlefield, but that's the Royal Park surface who look after it on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen. She might not use it herself, like the royal family used to up until Queen Victoria, but I'm sure Prince Charles has one eye on it. And hopefully, there were going to be some concerts in it this summer, and I'd imagine they've been cancelled. Although they're due in July and August, so I don't know how they're going to do it, if at all. And then, as soon as that wraps up, they've already got one eye on Christmas. So all parks, in a way, have to think something like 6 months in advance. So that takes you up onto your stop number 4. This is where you switch to your blue line. At this time of night, it's 7:15 as I'm doing it. Depending on the time of day, this will be your last chance to get the blue bus, because the last blue bus leaves, I think, at this time of year. We'll say 6 o'clock. And by the time we get back here, because this is where we're terminating, that's it, as far as buses go. So, get a bunch of people on, and we carry on up towards Marlborough. We're going to come up to it, away from it, back down behind it, and down the side of it. So hopefully you chaps are going to get a good enough look at it. And as you see, this large white edifice is a tremendous fixture. And it used to be an entrance of Buckingham Palace until 1852. Queen Victoria moved it into the park, where it formed part of the Great Exhibition, out towards where the Royal Albert Hall now is, and the Crystal Palace. And then after that was finished, it was moved to where it's been ever since. The traffic junction around it has grown since the 50s, and now, as you can see, it is utterly horrific to get around. So you come past that, the elephants are still there, the bronze relief to highlight the plight of the species in East Africa, unfurled by, amongst many others, head honcho Stanley Johnson, aka the father of our Prime Minister Boris. So that takes you around. From the 14th century until around about the early 18th century, this area was known as Tyburn. It's where we had public executions in that time. Around about 10,000 or so people met their fate over those 400 or so years. It started off on something known as the Tyburn tree, a sort of a wooden apparatus, and they were hanged from the branches, as was. And then eventually it grew into a gallows that could hold a dozen people at any one time. And it was a public spectacle people came to watch, especially if there was somebody rather important, like during the restoration of the monarchy from 1660. King Charles II was aggrieved at the fact that his father had been executed, the only monarch in our country's history to be executed, and spent quite a few years bringing people both here and the Tower of London to be hanged, drawn and quartered. What other ghastly way of dying. One of those that were brought here in 1661 was Oliver Cromwell, who had ruled over us as Lord Protector from 1649 to his death in 1658. So Cromwell was brought here with a couple of others, the regicides as they were known, those who had signed the King's death warrant, and he was hanged and in chains, and then his head was placed upon a spike on London Bridge, where it still was 5 years later for the Great Fire of London. However, his execution was in 1661. Cromwell died in 1660. His body was unearthed from Westminster Abbey and brought here to be executed. Grisly, I know. So there's the arch again on your right. As you see, you can walk through if you want. Technically, only the Queen is allowed to drive a vehicle through its central archway. And then ahead of you, 1.5 miles worth of 300 plus shops. Oxford Street, the former Tyburn way where the prisoners were brought down from the east. Selfridges, Debenhams, John Lewis, Primark, and many others. Usually on a Monday to Saturday open to at least 11, 10 o'clock some of them, and on the Sunday till about 6:30, 7 o'clock, because we have Sunday trading in this country, and that is the quietest I've seen Oxford Street, I'm sure. Well, other than that time I walked down onto it at 6 o'clock in the morning when I was at uni. There was nobody around, and I don't say that on the bus, that's for sure. So there's your stop number 5. If you're still after the blue bus, this is your last chance. And shortly we're going to head into Mayfair. Mayfair is one of the most desirable and sought after areas on the planet, and it has been for years. Now, one of the best ways to show it under one roof is the Aston Martin dealership. There on your left, vehicles starting off around about 170 odd thousand pounds. Nowadays most of them are much more expensive, and James Bond's getting a brand spanking new one for the film No Time to Die, which has been delayed now until at least November. So as you see, you're now in Mayfair. As you see, it looks rather quiet and like, and Mayfair has been a wealthy enclave really ever since the days of the Great Fire of London. Effectively, this was countryside in those days, and after the Great Fire of London, people had lost their homes or whatnot, and the rich came west, and this was apparently largely to avoid, especially in the 18th and 19th century, the smoke from factories which blew out over the commoners in the east. So Mayfair started to pop up in the 17th century, and by the 18th and 19th centuries it blossomed into what you see now. Houses start, flats and whatever, start around £30 million. The rent can be in the thousands a week, and it's nowadays mostly second homes and those that live overseas. It's lost some of its community. The Mayfair itself used to take place in where we're heading now, the Grosvenor Square, and the Mayfair was around a May pool, and everyone had a jolly good time dancing around it. However, as is the case when there was too much of a good time involving alcohol, the Victorians shut it down quicker than Donald Trump walking to a church. I definitely don't mention Donald Trump on the bus, even as a joke, because not everyone has a sense of humour, and I'm saying on the YouTube video, so I don't get, this is where the one person watching is now switched off. But Grosvenor Square used to be known as Little America until fairly recently, chiefly for what you see now onto your right hand side. And despite its current appearance, this is the former United States Embassy from 1960 to 2017. It was opened during the presidency of John F. Kennedy, and John F. Kennedy said to the Duke of Westminster, or at least wrote a letter to him, "Do you mind if we buy the land underneath so that we can say it sits on American soil?" And the Duke of Westminster at the time said, "Only if I had the territory my family lost back during the American War of Independence." And John F. Kennedy went away empty-handed. But on your left is where Dwight D. Eisenhower was based during the Second World War until D-Day, and that was the old American Embassy until 1960. It is at the time of the Second World War. Athol Harriman was the ambassador, and he married one of Winston Churchill's daughters. Tucked into the bottom left corner, now a Gordon Ramsay restaurant, is where John Adams, one of the founding fathers, lived when he was ambassador to the court of George III, who he used to wind up. Just off the top there, past the scaffolding, is where Jimi Hendrix used to live. And now on the top of your right, this delightfully quaint wooden structure is a memorial to the British victims of September the 11th, 2001. So that takes you out to one of the last hotels we're going to see on our journey, and that is the Connaught. Jack Nicholson likes to stay here whenever he's in town. President Nixon took it all over when he visited in the early 1970s, and indeed Tom Hanks was here a few months ago, as it now is. As you can see, there's usually some kind of fancy, expensive car parked up in it, and that takes you into the shops of Mayfair. Now, we're going to see more of these, but no matter where you look on your left and your right, they kind of operate unofficial rules, no queues out the doors, no prices in the windows, and you have to buzz to get in. And the fourth one, I should say, like Spanish Inquisition, is that if you look scruffy and airwise, you get turned away on the door. Now, if the traffic is good, we get straight into Berkeley Square. The amount I spent one long day stuck by these shops and talked absolute bilge. So Berkeley Square lends its name back in the day to a beautiful song called A Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square, which is the Queen Mother's favourite song, the late great Queen Mother's song when she was alive. Sadly, no nightingales sing in the square anymore. They were driven out by traffic and pollution, and people moved out by the Second World War, never really came back in the numbers that they were living here before the Second World War. The bright young things used to have a succession of parties around the homes here, including our future Edward VIII, when he was still David, Prince of Wales. He once turned up at a party in white hat and tails, and was told he looked frightfully disrespectful. Excuse me. So as you see, these are the oldest trees in London, apparently London plane trees, although it's meant to be a tree in a city that is almost 2,000 years old. So, as you see, Bentley and Bugatti on your right hand side, and then where the metal canopies stick out, that is where the Queen was born in 1926. And indeed, it was a stately home owned by her mother's family, the Bowes Lions, was destroyed by enemy action in 1941, hence why it's a rather unremarkable office space. Now, as you drive up on your left, all of these shops, well, you will see the private security in the door. They're the ones giving you the skunk eye. Clothing starting off around about £1,500 per dress. Watches and jewellery from around £10,000 per item, and that's largely why the security's in the windows. And some of these shops have royal connections, so if you see a crest in the door, in the doorway, that's who you have to get past, and as I say, they're the ones that turn you away. So you used to have a dog climbing down the outside of the building until a little while ago now, almost a year I suspect, and that sketch restaurant on your left is one of the top 10 restaurants on the planet as it was. So, all things being equal, this is now your entry into the West End of London. We're going to go down Regent Street through Piccadilly Circus and stay with the West End all the way through to the edge of Trafalgar Square. We'll leave it there, I think, chaps. It looks like I've got some of my mojo back, so to speak. So we've paused where Bruton Street joins Regent Street. And if anyone fancies it, I can always do this in stages, and it helps keep my juices flowing. I honestly thought I'd forgotten all my shit. So anyway, thanks for listening, chap.